Tim Linder here. So we're going to talk about in this movie paths and the path tool, basically vector tools inside of Photoshop. So Photoshop, as we've discussed before, is a traditionally considered a painting program dealing with raster graphics or graphics made of pixels. But there are some tools like the pen tool and the freeform pen tool and the type tool and the direct selection, the selection tool, and the shape tool down here that we're going to talk about that deal with vector graphics, points and lines and curves inside of Photoshop. So a way that you can deal with vector graphics. And so one of the first tools that we're going to learn is the pen tool. And these tools, or this tool, is traditionally borrowed from Illustrator. Adobe Illustrator is the vector-based program made by Adobe, and the tools that were utilized in it to create these points and lines and curves have been shared inside of Photoshop so that it has a few of the different tools to deal with those types of graphics. And so the pen tool is going to be the first one that we're going to look at. Now the pen tool can definitely be confusing for first-time users. It's not something that's intuitive to use in the sense that, when we start to learn how to draw and paint, when we're toddlers, you put pen to paper or marker to paper or crayon to paper and you drag a line to draw the line. Well, that's not necessarily what you do with the pen tool. You basically create a point and then click somewhere else and create 2 points and a line segment in between. And so I'm going to kind of show you how this works, but be aware this takes some practice. It takes some time to get used to, but there are certain benefits to using these tools that we'll also get into. So one of the things that is very important to take a look at when you're using the pen tool or the shape tool is the options bar up here at the top and what you are creating with it. So with the pen tool, I can either create a shape or a path. A shape will get put in the layers panel. A path will get put in the paths panel. So we'll work with shapes first. That's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to create a shape. But as soon as you use the pen or the shape tool, make sure the first thing you do is take a look at what you are creating with it. So we're going to be creating a shape, and inside of that shape, whatever we're going to create, notice it's going to be filled with black and it's going to be stroked with nothing at this point. This is just kind of a red line thing. There will be no stroke on the shape. So what I can do is, instead of clicking and dragging, I will just click a point and then click in another area of my image to create a line segment between those 2 points. And I can just keep clicking, and notice as I create these new points, a shape starts to get built, and inside, or what's filled inside that shape, is black. And in order to close out my shape, I can either hit the return or enter key, or if I move my cursor over my initial starting point, a little 0 shows up or next to my pen tool icon, and I can click, and now it's closed out the shape. I can also look over in my paths panel and see there's paths that are created, and with the shape tool there is a shape layer created. And if you don't have your paths panel open, you can always go to window and locate your paths panel there, or window and open your layers panel. But you probably already had your layers panel open, and what's located here is now a shape layer. This shape layer is a little bit different than a normal layer, and you can notice there's a little icon designating that it's a shape layer, and the difference is it's got a path associated with it. So there's a path, and inside of that path, whatever inside of those those pixels are filled with a specific color that you've designated. And if I want to change that color, I could always just double click on the layer over here and change the color, and lo and behold, the whole shape changes color. Okay, I can also adjust the shape itself differently with my path selection tool. So if I wanted to take that path and click on that path and move it, I can move the entire path, or I could move and adjust individual points within that path with the direct selection tool. So I'll grab my direct selection tool here, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to click just a point and move. Well, I am, just to show you this, but if I click on one point, notice it's moving all the points. What I'll do is I'll click once outside here so that I've deselected all the points that had been selected when I was choosing the regular selection tool, and I'll click on just one of these points, and notice now all these squares are not filled with black. They're not selected. None of them are selected right now. So I'll select one of them. If I want to select multiple, I'll hold shift, and I'll select 2 points now. Notice these 2 are black. And if I click and drag on them, now notice just these 2 points. Or if I just want to move this point, I can select points individually and move and change them with the direct selection tool. The path selection is an entire path. The direct selection tool will select just a line or a individual point or multiple points and lines if you're holding shift, and you can get those to move around and adjust the way that you like it. So this is fundamentally a different way of creating graphics using this vector-based tool. So another way that you can adjust your points, notice they're all kind of points and line segments, and there's no curves in here. If I want to add curves, what I can do is I can go back under my pen tool if I click and hold, and I can choose the convert anchor point tool. If I choose the convert anchor point tool and I click on a point, or I roll over it, notice the icon changes there, and if I click and drag on that point, notice two handlebars come outside of that point, and it starts to make a curve on that point. Click on this point and drag, it's going to make a curve. Remember, you've got to be careful of which way you drag, because I could loop it over itself and drag back this way and get kind of a weird looking operation. But if I click on that point, I can also go back to my straight line segments instead of. So clicking and dragging, I can get my curves. The further the handlebars, the wider the curve. Okay, so I could have a really short handlebars, which doesn't make much of a curve at all, or really long handlebars, makes a big curve. But be careful, if you loop these line segments over the top of each other, you get kind of an inverse thing going. So you might want that to happen. But anyway, that's how you can adjust and grab your handlebars and make those changes. Also notice with our direct selection tool, if there are handlebars, those handlebars can be changed and moved along with the points. So I can change those and move those around with my direct selection tool. I can also use some other tools like the delete anchor point tool to get rid of points altogether, or the add anchor point to add anchor points. So if I wanted to put that line segment back, get my direct selection tool and move that point back the way that it was, I could do that. Okay, so this is the shape layer created with a pen tool and modified with the direct selection tool or the convert anchor point tools. You'll also notice that some of the things I can do with the fill here and stroke is obviously I can add a stroke to this shape layer as well. So these can become very handy. And one of the nice things about it is, notice how nice swooping curve this is. That would be almost impossible to do even with a Wacom tablet, or if you're really good with the mouse. You're just going to be somewhat jittery as you move across here. You're not going to be able to get that nice smooth curved line with a mouse or a Wacom tablet like you would if you were to draw it with the pen tool. So that's a certain benefit that you're going to have. Another benefit is that these vector-based shape layers are really resolution independent. So no matter if I went to image size and scaled this, or did a resample image and gave this 20,000 pixels by 20,000 pixels, it would redraw this curve to give it whatever resolution I decided to use. So that resampling doesn't really affect a shape layer the way that it would a normal layer. So that's another benefit to using these shape layers as well. So that's the pen tool. Another way that you can, I'm going to go ahead and just delete this layer and go back to my pen tool again.